And we're live. And if you're on YouTube, you are now watching in lieu of fun in an infinite loop progression. If you're anyone else, you're saying, why is he doing that to the poor YouTube people? And the YouTube people will never know. You have to be on Crowdcast, Facebook, or Twitter to experience that for real. It is Sunday, March 14th, 2021, 5:04 p.m. We are late today because of Kate Klonick. because it is like nobody's fault.
It is 100% mine. Yep, I'll take it.
And I also
want to say, none of the guilt that you might have if it was your fault.
Kate didn't even have time to chapstick up before we went live.
And let's while we're ragging on Kate here, she totally blew the mystery guest thing this week.
Oh God,
because she's like on Friday, she just sends me a text like, "Oh, and I asked Jordan to be on the show on Sunday," and I was like,
I actually said on Pi Day, and I was like on 3/14. And then I realized that I had asked you and not Ben, because you were my mystery guest. And it was like going to be so appropriate and perfect. But then I blurted it out to him for no reason whatsoever.
But Kate, I'm glad you did, because if you hadn't, I would have, because I texted Ben this morning because his butt texted me. And I actually never realized that the mystery guest was a mystery guest from one host to the other. I thought it was just a mystery to the fans. I didn't know that.
No,
and then I felt quite awkward.
No, because we have one of the running
Kate.
gags on the show is we try to get people to reveal the mystery guest too. So it's like, so who's the mystery guest this week?
I see.
And anyway, and sometimes I'm stupid enough that I almost always say it, but then I'm like remembered by the fact that mystery is in the title that I'm not supposed to tell.
So it is Pi Day today, which we're going to get to whether this is the dumbest holiday around. We're going to, but before we do, Jordan points out that it is some other important days today. So let's 3/14. What else can we say about 3/14?
Well, so what did we say? We said it's Einstein's birthday today. We said I already forgot. We talked about this, and then I forgot. Grammys Day today.
It is the eve of the Ides of March, and you had a good line about that.
The eve of the Ides. I was going to repeat it without you saying that I had a good line about it, because that makes it sound a little bit. Now it
sounds a little contrived. Okay,
so what's the contrived line? We say it's the day that you don't have to quite beware yet, but you're just supposed to be a little bit antsy. That's right. For the Ides of March. Thank you, Kate.
You might get murdered tomorrow.
Wait, hold on. You have to see that you'll get a picture of the tomorrow's beast of the day, which is this lovely 3D printed pencil holder.
Wow,
Caesar stepped in the back.
That it's pretty. It's
that
kind
is
of
tomorrow's
amazing.
Good morning image. I'm telling you.
I call that et tu Ticonderoga.
Yeah.
Oh man, there is a Ticonderoga in there.
There's always a Ticonderoga.
I started collecting pencils in the pandemic, Jordan. That was one of my weird things that I took up. So anyway,
for those of you who do not know, our mystery guest is Jordan Ellenberg, mathematician at the University of Wisconsin, childhood friend of mine, fellow child of biomedical research statistician, in his case. We went to Seder together every year for many years as children. And novelist.
How long have you been putting up with Penn's bullshit then? For like how long? Like approximately.
Ben used to make me recite the quadratic formula really fast. Remember
that? That is incorrect. That is in fact a bald-faced lie. Jordan Ellenberg, when he was like 7 years old or maybe 6, showed up at my sister's bat mitzvah and announced that his name was Math Mouth. And his evidence for this was the speed with which he could recite the quadratic formula.
I love every part of this story. Please
I
don't
didn't say
stop.
how it started, Ben. I'm just saying that perhaps sometime after that point, then you made me do it once you knew that I could do it.
Math sounds like the least sexy, like, superhero that I could ever come up with.
and that's a good segue to Pi Day.
Yeah,
which,
okay.
Like, first of all, I want to suggest that there are 3 dumb things about Pi Day.
Oh, just 3. Okay, not 3.14.
No, not
okay.
3.14. Because first of all, if you can isolate pi to a day rather than to a moment in the day, you've actually rounded it and it's not pi. So that's problem number 1.
Yes, that's fair.
Like the moment you know, the whole point is it shouldn't be effable in that except as a relationship. The second thing that's dumb about it is that getting children to memorize as many digits as they can of pi, which is the way many schools seem to observe Pi Day, seems to A, have nothing to do with math, and B, simply be another vehicle by which children can compete with each other. And we can kind of convince ourselves that it has something to do with STEM, but it's really just like memorizing the statistics off of baseball cards. And then
which is also good, by the way.
Which is also a great way to spend time, but not something that schools generally organize around. And then 3, yeah, nice. good. And then 3, it prevents us from thinking about what would actually be a cool math holiday.
You know, so to your first point, Ben, I think that just shows when you sort of complain that it's for it to be a full day, like doesn't really count as it's actually a moment. It shows that your social circle doesn't include a lot of people who, in fact, count down to the exact moment as if it were the ball falling in New Year's Eve. So you're in the bubble, is all I can say. You don't understand like how the real heads celebrate Pi Day. So that, you know, just
was this always? I mean, like, was this always a thing? Like even before? Like, no. I don't know. I don't remember this being a thing when, I mean, I was just starting to be a thing.
And I promise I would know. I promise. I'm a in 1985, I would have been appropriately in the center of that circle and I would know. But
well, because, you know, I was actually just saying this on Twitter to George Conway. We had Mole Day. Like, I remember that specifically my chemistry teacher in
June 22nd?
No. Wait,
6.022 times 10 to the 23rd?
I mean, I
should
think
be June 22nd.
I know, but like, no, is that? I think mole is a whole unit of measure, not a constant necessarily, right? Like
mole is the.
Ben, I just want to say that Ben's pivot from deriding people memorizing digits to Avogadro shaming Kate was incredibly fast.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
So I just want
Mole Day was a day in which we celebrated, and this is why I know it wasn't in June, and I know that it wasn't tied to the actual constant, was because we would celebrate it by making hot chocolate in various amounts and trying to figure out what the precise ratio of
how many grams of hot chocolate you needed to be a mole of hot chocolate.
And we would do like all of these different taste tests for like the different, like, anyways. So this is how I remember this, but I was like, I don't think that was tied to like a specific day. It was tied to like, we declared it Mole Day, and then we got to drink hot chocolate in chemistry class that day. And that was like how I remember it. And so it definitely wasn't June. But yeah, I just don't think that this has always been a thing.
Do you know, Jordan, how Pi Day started? Because it was not on my consciousness at all until my children were in school. And then it was by then it was pretty universal. So you've been in the math world the whole time. When was the first time you were aware that people thought of March 14th as anything other than Erev Ides of March?
It's a good question. this is going to be kind of a guess, but I would say like maybe 20 years. I don't think it certainly didn't exist when I was in college. And certainly, as you say, by the time my kids were in school, it was a thing. So somewhere in between there. So I would sort of guess it's like a 21st century innovation. But it's an interesting question whether it was some enterprising math teacher who got it started, or I actually have no idea. Maybe people in the room do, but I don't know.
And now, is it observed in any material respect by the University of Wisconsin math department? I mean, are you expected to, give a Pi Day address?
No, I mean, there are various things. I mean, sometimes there's like, I think it's more, I have to say that in our circles, it's more customarily observed by eating pie than by memorizing digits, which I think is a little déclassé, as you say. There's, I think Williams College kind of famously has like a sort of pi versus e debate where the members of the faculty go up against each other to sort of like argue about which is the more fundamental mathematical constant, pi versus e. I think some of these can be found on video.
I mean, that's actually an interesting question.
Well, so Drew Ricketts has just shared a History Channel article on the history of Pi Day.
Oh.
And it was an annual celebration founded in 1988. So Jordan is correct. By physicist Larry Shaw. March 14th was selected because the numerical date, blah, 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 represents the first 3 digits of pi. The first Pi Day celebration took place at the Exploratorium.
That totally makes sense.
Place of
Doesn't
work.
That make sense? Yes.
The festivities have gotten larger each year and now include webcasts and a virtual party in Second Life. It wasn't until 2009, however, that it became an official national holiday when the U.S. House of Representatives passed legislation.
Who sponsored that bill? Can we find that
out? I don't know. But the point is that Jordan's chronology is right. It didn't exist at all in 1985 when he certainly would have known. The first glimmer is right around the time he goes to college, but it's on the West Coast. And then it's somewhere around 20 years ago that it starts picking up, really starts picking up. And by last year, by 2009, sorry, that's 11 years ago, it becomes a national thing. So Jordan's intuitive chronology is about right. The article goes on to note that it is now commonly observed by eating fruit pies. So, Kate, did you make us pie?
No, I didn't.
You were threatening to.
I know. I was going to. I was like, I was going to just like make an entire pie and then just like awkwardly sit here and eat it all like by myself like for like most of the show. And then I fell asleep. And so, because I lost an hour of sleep and I couldn't sleep last night for some reason. So none of that happened. And instead I barely made it onto the show.
Speaking of time, I have a moment of crow to eat.
Oh, good.
And also a moment of triumph to report. The moment of crow is that, yes, as Thomas Ilves said, I did screw up the universal time of the show today because thinking of UTC as a constant, used the same time that I always have, forgetting, of course, that our clocks had moved relative to it. And so so in lieu of fun, starting at 5 o'clock Eastern means it is 1 hour earlier now than it was yesterday. So we are now 2100 Universal Time. But secondly, and really importantly, I received the following text message this afternoon from the illustrious Jonathan Rausch, who watched the show with John Lovett and writes, "You totally win the Universal Time debate. If February can be summer in Australia, then 6 p.m. can be lunchtime in the USA. Plus, international scheduling is a nightmare, and I have to do it all the time now." So I want to say to all of you who derided me,
Wait, one of your best friends sent you a text message saying that you won the debate, and that's what you've got.
This is the illustrious, intellectual Jonathan Rauch. He's on my side. Okay. I don't know what Jordan Ellenberg thinks. He's in this goofy Midwestern time zone.
Okay. Whatever you have to do to sleep at night, Ben. It's just like I have here with me one of my favorite books that John introduced me to. This is Mathematics Made Difficult. This is Carl Linderholm. So I don't know how to encapsulate what this book is if you're a math geek. Really, do you know, Jordan? Like, have you just heard of it, or like, what is the legend around this book?
It was kind of circulated. I mean, I think it's not. I think at least in the past, it wasn't a book you could go to the store and buy. And I don't know if it's gone back into print, but it was, sort of Xerox copies of it would circulate. And it's this kind of, how would you describe it? It's always hovering between being very serious and being an incredible joke. And I think it's kind of both superimposed.
It's like Scott Shapiro wrote this book.
So I think it's impossible to sort of describe what it's like without showing a page of it. Maybe you should.
Yeah. I think I was going to do this. So I have a bunch of questions here that I think are but they're also just like the most perfect. So it starts with chapter 1 is, so you think you can count. Question number 1. Whether anybody really counts. Objection 1. In order really to count, the counter must know the names of the numbers. But no one really knows the true names of the numbers, since Englishmen call them one thing, Chinamen another. Therefore, no one really counts. Reply to objection 1. It is not necessary to know the real names of numbers in order to count. You may call the numbers anything you like. Moreover, you need not use what are usually called numbers at all in counting. But to put it otherwise, almost anything can serve as a number if you so desire. And so it just is like this beautiful kind of it's this beautiful kind of discussion of, and like this is kind of one of the illustrations of around the idea of that we talked about last time with Jordan about topology and geometry and the insides and outsides of things. He's like drawn these like kind of like comical drawings about holes and trying to make things. I mean, they're just like kind of wonderful. But the best part is the back jacket, where he says, this is the back jacket after it gives like that he's about where he lives, and says, before lecturing at Roosevelt University at the University of Michigan, Illinois, he was briefly a waiter, but he was fired because he could not remember on which side of the plate to put the knife, fork, and spoon. His mathematical interests include abstract languages and ergodic theory. He is nearsighted in the left eye, but not in the right, and astigmatic in the right eye, but not in the left. He can wiggle his ears only simultaneously and can cross the right-left fortoe over the right-left great fortoe and vice versa. No other ordered pairs of toes on the same foot besides those 4 being crossable. A small patch of dark skin on his right side contains hundreds of moles. During lectures, he removes and replaces his jacket frequently. As to likes and dislikes, his favorite wild insect is the tarantula. Favorite tame insect.
Tarantula is not an insect.
The favorite tame insect, the cheese mite. The favorite instrument, the Akkadian accordion. The favorite book, The Anatomy of Melancholy. The most disliked tame plant, the privet. The most disliked wild plant, scrub oak. The most disliked part of speech, the adverb. The most disliked country, Mordor. Besides children and cheese mites, Dr. Linderholm's house contains a red Persian cat. Guinea pigs live in the garden. And I just like think this is like, it's just a tremendous, it's just like kind of like this crazy.
I just want to say he might be a brilliant mathematician, but he does not know that neither the tarantula nor the mite is an insect. Both are arachnids. All mites are arachnids.
My reaction is this dude definitely juggles, right? I just like hear that. Like, dude definitely
totally juggles.
Clubs, by the way, not just balls. This guy 100% juggles clubs.
He juggles clubs and probably can do 7 of them.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's just like a tremendous book. But I was going to ask you about the inside and the outside of a circle.
Yeah,
that was basically what I was going to ask.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Does he bring that up?
Yeah, he does. It says that's what it's like. He kind of ends with it, so I thought it would be perfect. Let's see. Oh, look, he has a picture. Yeah, sorry. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. I'll find where the oh yeah. Let's see how he puts it. Where is it, John? This one or this one?
This is about
whether a circle.
Question
29. Whether a circle has an inside or an outside. Objection 1. Consider a hoop or a loop floating in space after being jettisoned by a lunar module. The hoop is a circle, but it is not a subset of any particular surface. The remainder of the universe after the hoop has been deleted is connected. Hence, the circle has no inside and outside. Reply to objection 1. It is necessary to stipulate that the circle lies on some surface. Objection 2. Consider a circle drawn on an inner tube of the sort used to inflate the tires of automobiles. If the tube is cut out along the circle, it may or may not fall into two pieces. For a very small circle, the tube will fall into two pieces. But for a circle drawn right around the tube, when the tube is cut, it remains in one piece. So this is the example that he uses to illustrate this. So this is the first example of drawing a circle on a tube, and the second example.
Something I draw a lot.
Yeah. And so then he goes, and then he throws a bunch of math at me that I'm not going to like talk about because it's like some symbols that I don't know what they mean anymore. And then
the S upper one is a circle. It's our
okay. Oh, okay. So then yeah. And then the equator is a circle running around the middle of the Earth. The Arctic Circle also runs around the Earth, but not around its middle. It usually held that Santa Claus lives inside the Arctic Circle and the Patagonians live outside the Arctic Circle. But on which side of the equator does Santa Claus live? On the inside with the Patagonians outside, or is it they who live inside the equator? And so I actually like that last one because I think that it's the most like kind of, I don't know why. It just settles with me the best. But also I think that the anyways, so tell us all about the inside and the outside of a circle.
Well, so I think what he speaks to there, and by the way, I had forgotten, I haven't really looked at this book in 20 years, and I had forgotten that he uses this device of sort of speaking and then objecting and then replying to the objection. I like that because it's
excellent.
Such a good depiction of the way mathematical thinking actually works interiorly, right? I mean, you sort of have to have that habit of objecting to yourself constantly in order to do mathematics. I suppose that's not particular to mathematics, but it's certainly very characteristic of mathematical thinking.
It reminds me of philosophy very much, honestly.
It is, and in a similar way. I mean, well, okay, let me not talk about philosophy. It's not within my ambit to talk about it. But to this question, I think it really speaks to this question of when you say, does a circle have an inside or outside? You know, you have to say, like, where is the circle? Like, what is its universe? You know, a circle drawn in three-dimensional space, the space in which by some accounts we live, that's one kind of thing. And it very clearly doesn't separate space into two regions. But a circle drawn on a sheet of paper or even an infinite plane certainly does. That's the so-called Jordan curve theorem, the original mathematical Jordan, not me. But what's interesting about let's speak to that theorem for a minute if we can, because
of course
it probably seems pretty clear that if you draw a circle on a sheet of paper or on an infinite plane, then there's no ambiguity, right? You sort of know, there it is, right? You know what's inside, you know what's outside, and you even know that the inside is something that is the same shape as a disk, even if it's not a circle, even if it's a very wobbly curve. This is really what this theorem is about. The inside of that curve, as long as it closes up on itself, looks like the same as the disk. Maybe it's sort of deformed in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems really obvious, and it's a very traditional thing to teach in a first course in topology. It's what it was taught in the first course I took in topology in college. And this kind of thing is the subject of a huge amount of argument in mathematical pedagogy, because we say, should we prove things that seem obvious? You know, a statement like the Jordan curve theorem, or a statement that, like, if a graph is below the x-axis over here and above the x-axis over here, then it has to cross the x-axis somewhere in between. Should we prove things like that or not? And there's one school of thought that says, yes, you should, because if you're not careful about defining your terms, you might say things that aren't true. I think that's the point he's taking in the beginning of that book, where he's like, do you really know how to count? Do you really know what you mean by a number? Another point of view is that there's something inherently off-putting about that for most people, and that the sort of like beauty of sort of attacking things that you find very obvious, and the satisfaction of sort of seeing a long formal proof of something that your intuition already tells you is maybe not so attractive for like most people. And in fact, what I remember most about learning that in class is that I was pretty bored. Everybody was pretty bored. I didn't see the charm at that time. I remember the two kids who sat in front of me, both of whom went and got PhDs in math at great institutions. They were certainly very good at math. They were good students. They just, I mean, they would, I hope I can say, I mean, they would just constantly just start making out. They were dating, I should say.
I was like, in class?
In class, every time, well, because, you know, the professor would turn to the board for like a long time. I mean, these proofs are pretty long. So he'd be facing the board for like enough time to really work up some momentum. You know what I mean? And so they...
This is like way more interesting than I thought PhDs in math could ever be.
Well, they were undergraduates.
Okay.
So we're all like 19.
That makes a little more sense.
Just really like, they were just really like, we gotta somehow like tear ourselves out of this timeline and be like doing anything but like listening to this proof of this incredibly obvious statement. You know what I mean? But
isn't proving obvious things kind of foundational? I mean,
yeah, I think that's what he's saying.
I mean, no, but I mean, like, if you just jump into the philosophy domain for a minute, I don't think Descartes really had a big, serious question about whether he existed. But, you know, the occupation of proving what was obvious to him was important. And why is this any different from that?
Well, I suppose what I think is that as teachers, how to put it? Look, I'm the kind of person who finds that kind of thing inherently appealing. That's like my aesthetic, right? But there are also lots of non-obvious things that we prove in math. So to give you an example, I'm teaching a class called Real Analysis right now. I've actually never taught this course before in all my time of being a mathematician, but I happen to be teaching it this semester. And it's a class that's filled with both very obvious statements and very non-obvious statements. So, you know, we start with very much this question that you spoke to, Kate, of like, what is a number? Like, what is it, a point on a line? Like, what does that actually mean? Like, how can we actually define what a real number is? But we also sort of talk about things like, you know, the fact that there is a good notion of one infinite set being larger than another. There are a way to compare different infinities and say definitively that one is bigger than the other. That's extremely not obvious. And I think there's a strong argument we should sort of start with that, something that's extremely not obvious, to convince students, okay, there is some stuff out there beyond where my intuition reaches that's real, that's surprising. And then I think the student is much more willing to sort of go along with, and now let me sort of go beyond your intuition about stuff that you think you already do know. Because I think if you don't do that, there's a real, you know, I talk about this in the book that's coming out about the way we teach geometry in high school. We do spend a lot of time proving things. The students will say like, well, I knew that. And it's not very satisfying. I think it's sort of bad pedagogy to say like, no, you're wrong, you didn't know that. I mean, it's almost a bit insulting. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so
how I talk to my students all the time in law school.
So realistically, what's the alternative if you're in geometry where you're really teaching how to prove, right? I mean, the geometry itself is less important, I think, than the formal proof method that's taught through geometry. Like, if you just allow people to assume things that aren't yet proven, aren't you kind of defeating the purpose?
I think, you know, I would say no, because I think that this formal method of proof, it is absolutely a part of what we do when we think mathematically, but it's not the whole. And so I think there's sort of a long-standing habit that sort of starts in the beginning of the 20th century of being like, what this really is a formal game we play with symbols on a paper where we sort of deduce things deductively from axioms. That was an extremely popular point of view, that it's just some kind of a language game that we do, but it's so false to actual mathematical practice, and it's so false to what anyone would be doing if they were any kind of either a pure mathematician or a mathematical scientist or an engineer or somebody who uses mathematics in a certain way. There are different modes of knowing something. There's things that you know about the way space works because you experience them, and that's one way of knowing it. And another way of knowing it is writing formal proofs, and those don't take you to the same place. But I think if you sort of deny, I mean, maybe it's a distinction, not a difference, Ben, but I think that if you deny that a student knows what they know, that doesn't put them in a position to be willing to listen to the next thing you say. That's
relativist.
Yeah, I mean, well, like, it reminds me a lot of like kind of some of the cognitive science studies we did with naive physics, where like that naive physics, I think, so are you familiar with naive physics?
Kind of, like you'd run off the cliff and like.
Yes, it's just kind of basically you have people predict what they think is going to happen based on kind of like you start a ball rolling off a table, and then you have like before it goes, you ask them to draw the arc of the ball, or like the where the ball will go next and the path that the ball will like continue on its arc. And people are remarkably bad at this. Like remarkably bad. Like frequently we'll have the ball shoot straight out for a period of time and then drop straight down or drop straight off the edge. Very few people get the arc particularly correct. I actually had like a whole theory that this was also that the development of naive physics was like based around people who had watched Looney Tunes growing up and watched like literally like I'm like serious like why I'm like there was like an entire sorry I'm like swatting at the sun as if that's going to get it out of my eyes but seriously that there was kind of like this notion that you had been propagandized into really bad physics through kind of like this new type of mechanism of
Did you do
cartoons.
Cross-national stuff to sort of like find like a population uncontaminated by Looney Tunes?
Yeah, no one had done this. No, I mean like it's actually kind of like a dead area of like cognitive science now. But like anyways, they teach it kind of as I did it in grad school. And but anyways, I just think that it's really I think that it's super fascinating. I think that to your point, Ben and Jordan, that there is everything is kind of assumed. Obviously, everything is from your perspective, is I guess my point. And there can be some things that you're incredibly wrong about. I mean, this is why like the Earth was flat until we like started to sail around the Earth, and someone was like, "Huh, that's really interesting." That's like or that the sails disappear or, like, let's look at like the heliocentric model of like, or the geocentric model of how we're doing this. That doesn't actually make sense mathematically, but at a practical level, it would make sense. Like, in fact, that was the reason that everyone adhered to it. And it was the rule for so long until it was disproven. And so like, I kind of think that like, that's what I like about this is that like it really kind of is like in a contrarian way. And this is, I guess, what is also frustrating to me about math, this contrarian, like relentless way of like, okay, is Santa Claus inside the equator or outside the equator? Like, who the fuck cares? Like, right? Like first of all, Santa Claus doesn't exist. Second of all, like, what does it matter? But like all of a sudden for that takes the same premise of like, is there an inside and outside of the circle? And when you realize that you constrain that around a sphere, that it completely changes the nature of the circle and the importance of it, then all of a sudden it becomes a really important question. Does that make yeah.
And what's great about that is that, nothing about that discussion is really like a formal proof in the style of Euclid, but it's a very proof-like argument in that it's saying it's right. It's putting pressure on your intuition and saying like, oh, this theorem that a sphere cuts into an inside and an outside, it must have something to do with the fact that the sphere lives in a plane and not somewhere else. Because on a globe, it's different. On a globe, I might naively think, oh, there's a clear inside and outside. But what if the circle is exactly halfway around? There's no kind of axiom, conclusion.
Right.
To that it's absolutely mathematical thinking. It's absolutely something that we want to teach if we teach mathematics.
So you have just finished a book, and judging from your Facebook posts, you have now finished the editing process of the book.
Absolutely finished. I'm not allowed to change it anymore. They have told me politely.
And I do want to say what I have not said in response to any of your Facebook posts, which is you should defer to your copy editor more.
Wait, who asked you, Ben?
Jordan did, actually, repeatedly. He had this long string of Facebook posts that was like, my copy editor thinks blank, that there should be a hyphen here. I'm inclined not. Hive mind, what do you think? And people would come and vote and give their learned
are you just like looking for trolls? Like you're going around asking people about hyphens on social media? Like, no, I mean, no, but yeah, you're going to get a lot of opinions.
But what I want to understand, are you laying out a general principle of deference to copy editors, or are you just saying I personally was wrong about everything? And
no. So the longer I have been in this business, the more I have come to believe in specialization.
Yep.
And I believe that it really doesn't matter what style book publishers use, and copy editors are better trained to the style books than I am. And there are certain things I will lay down the law on, that I just have particularized views of. But there are very few of them. And my general view is internal consistency is more important than almost any stylistic choice.
I completely agree with that.
And so let the copy editors be the copy editors, and my job is to write things.
But the point is that you have the exact same stance as me. You say you have a very small percentage of things that you actually are going to fight about.
Mine's much smaller than yours.
How many changes I let go? You have no idea.
I know exactly how many things you were seriously scratching your head about and wondering if you should defer to the copy editor relative to what I've gone through when I've gone through a book. Congratulations on finishing the book.
Congratulations.
When is it out?
It is out on May 25th. I should find some mathematical constant that's roughly 5.25. I don't have one in mind, but maybe
5.25. Well, that goes so nicely. It's like goes so nicely into each other. It's a pentagram.
1/4. That's true. It's like the beginning of a geometric progression, and there's lots of geometric progressions in the book.
Exactly.
525, 125. I mean, I guess any two numbers are the beginning of a geometric progression. Now that I think of it, so maybe that wasn't such a great answer. Someone's here. Someone's joined us.
Argyris is here, and two other people are about to pop on screen to ask questions. But Christopher, the floor is yours from London.
So Ben, my upvoted question was about your high school classmates and whether there was anyone else famous you guys went to high school with. But I really wanted to ask.
Jordan is not a high school classmate.
Oh,
he is 2 years behind me in high school.
Okay, so in high school at the same time. I think that counts.
Oh,
so I'll ask about the movies. So what's the best film that's not really about math, that's not advertised as about math or like billed as being about math, that's actually about math that you think is interesting or exciting?
What a deep question. So it has to be a movie that's not ostensibly about math, but there's something.
Yeah, it's not about like a tortured mathematician trying, kind of, or something, I don't know.
But a movie that's actually about math?
Yeah, that deals with it in sort of in an interesting way, or I mean, it could be about a mathematician, but I just sort of think, there's obviously stories like, what is the story about the breaking of the Enigma codes? That's sort of about mathematicians, but that's not math.
I suppose I'll give two answers. Like one, I think to your question, I tend not to like most math movies, but I think that's not fair. I think karate people also don't like karate movies. I mean, I think it's like very hard to make one that's, but I would say probably the play Proof. I didn't see the movie of it, but I know there was one. And that play, at all the moments when they weren't actually ostensibly talking about math, the math was pretty good. Like I felt like when they sort of had to talk about it, it was pretty bad. But the sort of psychic nature of the task, I thought was like well portrayed, at least in the play. The other thing I think of is that this is not a movie at all, but there's okay, you guys are gonna have to help me, Ben. What's the Samuel Beckett book where he's moving the stones around from hand to hand. I want to say it's Murphy, but I could be wrong about that. Anyway, there's
I don't know.
There's a novel by Samuel Beckett, which I think is Murphy, but I could be wrong, where there's just like a very long section about the main character moving pebbles from one pocket to another and kind of like thinking about the ways in which he's going to sort of make sure that every pebble has spent a certain amount of time in every pocket. And it's an extremely mathematical moment, and it extremely well depicts the sort of a certain kind of mathematical thinking. I actually have no idea if Beckett was interested in math or had any training. I think he just may have naively had that vibe, that aesthetic. So if somebody in the chat knows which Samuel Beckett novel has the pebbles, if you search Beckett pebbles, I'm sure you'll find it. It's a famous scene, and I can't think of it.
What about, like, I always hated it, but A Beautiful Mind, or
like
Malloy?
Somebody says Malloy. Okay, yes. Malloy.
That's what I meant.
Thank you, Mike.
So
Sorry.
A Beautiful Mind was
about Nash, right?
Yeah, it's a wonderful portrait of Nash, but it has almost no math in it.
Well, be careful, because there's two things by that title: a really, really excellent book and a really, really crap movie. So
I thought the movie was crap.
The book is wonderful.
Is the book wonderful?
Oh yes.
Oh, okay. I never even knew that.
I mean, it's a nonfiction sort of biography and journalistic kind of biography of Nash. It's wonderful.
I thought that I really get very upset when they take kind of people that are very smart and a little manic, and then like overplay the mental illness and like make it seem so tortured and such like a disease. Like, I don't know, like it's just like and it becomes like whatever good that they're doing or whatever things that they're seeing or the beautiful things that they are seeing are just like shredded by whatever kind of storyline they have to compel, like around a character.
Well, the
example of this, of course, is Presumed Innocent, which I'm just going to ruin for you all because it sucks. So, like, I mean,
great. I love spoilers.
The whole big reveal is that, like, oh, like, you know, who was the murderer? It was the wife. Why? Because she was a mathematician, and it broke her womanly brain to like have all those abstract thoughts. It like wasn't suited for her feminine nature, and so it drove her to become a murderess. Like, that's there. I spoiled it for you, but I would claim it was pre-spoiled by the author. Sorry, Scott Turow, you wrote other good books.
Well, I will just say that many years ago, I went to the theater with my mother and one Susan Ellenberg, who is, among other things, the mother of Jordan Ellenberg. And we saw Derek Jacobi in a play, I believe, called Breaking the Code, which was a play about Alan Turing. It's a lovely play and very well done. And it has no math in it at all.
Yeah, there's a lot of Turing material, none of which I've seen. So maybe those are the right answers to this question.
Cryptonomicon is a lovely depiction of, if you like, I don't know if you read science fiction, Jordan, but
I do, but I haven't read that.
It was so good. Neil Stephenson. It's actually quite a decent amount of math in it. And then 7Es, if you like quantum mechanics, is like literally just like a whole thing about like quantum, like there's many chapters devoted to quantum mechanics.
I don't like quantum mechanics. It's hard to be sure.
Yeah.
Daniel, the floor is yours. You are not backlit today, so I'm saying you're out of your native habitat, even though you are on the right couch.
I see the light, though. I see the light behind him.
Yeah, but when Daniel is properly situated in his environment, it's a very specific thing.
Jordan, I'm curious what you think the most misapplied statistical technique is, or the most misunderstood statistical concept is.
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, the thing is, in some sense, like, statistical concepts are, the more applied it is, the more misapplied it is. So in some sense, I don't want to trash like a really good statistical concept like linear regression, or for that matter, taking the average, right? The most basic statistical concept there is taking the average of a bunch of numbers. And I could say it's misapplied a lot, and sometimes people do it when they should be doing a median or should be doing some other measure, central tendency or measure of typicality, blah, 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 blah. But in some sense, it's because it's so useful and so general that it's sometimes used when it doesn't belong. So I feel like it's Oh yeah, somebody says in the chat Bayes' theorem, which is kind of a good example in that I would point to as something that people think that they're using and think that their reasoning is like much more incontrovertible than it actually is. You sort of say you're a Bayesian, you put on a kind of armor of Bayesianism and assert that, you know.
Okay, no, hold on. I want to unpack that. What do you mean? Because like, I mean, it's like do you mean like as compared to being a frequentist, or do you mean as like just in general?
Well, people just like saying they're, you know, they're Bayesians.
I think sometimes people say they're a Bayesian to mean something which is very appropriate, which is that you have certain beliefs and then they get modified by facts that you encounter in the world.
Unlike me, I have certain beliefs and they're impenetrable by facts I might encounter. They're unshakable based on evidence or changed circumstance.
See, in Bayes land, we like to say people like you have spiky priors, Ben, and that's not a nice thing to say.
You and your may the spikes of my priors impale you.
You're from cognitive science, right? So you guys talk about spiky priors, right? Isn't that a thing? I don't know.
But wait, hold on. I mean, so basically your idea is that like, I mean, but this is like also, what is Ben doing? What are you doing?
Spiky priors. Those are the spikes.
It's like you're like triceratops or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There's like, so hold on. I really want to actually ask about this because as like I completely agree with you. I think that this is like a lot of things, like this is like coast, right? Like I feel like people are constantly talking about, I don't know, Coase theorem, and people are like, well, it involves transaction costs and involves friction. And this is like this vast oversimplification of like both what Coase meant and didn't mean. And he gets dragged into, I don't know if you're familiar with Coase, Ronald Coase's like theory.
I sort of know the name. Is it a thing that people go around saying they're Coaseans? Is that like a thing?
No, but people will invoke Coase a lot. So Coase won the Nobel Prize for, he was an economist and he won the Nobel Prize in economics. I don't remember when, but he's at the University of Chicago. And his theory was basically like all things being equal, if two people are set from like the same like neutral bargaining position, like there will become more, like the lower the transaction cost to bargaining, the more perfectly they will bargain. And the more that's basically kind of this idea of like kind of, and the externalities will be like lower. And then like this has been, you know, first of all, there's no such like prior. It's like really actually about like, man, Mike Godwin is just like correcting me in the chat today, like ruthlessly. Not the Nobel Prize in Economics, Nobel Memorial Prize. I apologize. Not a real Nobel Prize. Sorry, Mike. Like, anyways. But
I was thinking it, Kate, but I didn't say it.
But anyways, I just thought that basically that like I learned this in property theory. You could learn it in economics. You could learn it in anything. And it became like when I talked to someone, I was talking to a friend who's getting his PhD in economics, and he jokingly said that Coase didn't even know what Coase meant. And I kind of really liked that because I feel like it is the same with any of these kind of theories that are so basically, that are both so brilliant and were hard to prove. And until there was one person who proved it or made a name for themselves proving it, like Bayes, that you just like, and then it takes on a life of its own and almost becomes like a memeified version of the original theory and like a code word that you say to other people so that they know that you know what Bayesian reasoning is, so that they know that you know what Coase is, or like, are you kind of seeing what I'm saying, or do you?
Yeah, but I actually think of it as more benign than not, in that I think like usually if things catch on like that, it's because there's sort of like some real intellectual value there. So it's great. If I sort of slightly complain about it. On the other hand, if people are going around saying Bayes, and it inclines people to go and learn about what Bayes theorem is and what Bayesian reasoning really is, like great, because that has like real value, and I'm sure Coase theorem does too.
I just want to point out that both Bayes and Coase, one syllable in their names, and Ellenberg has 3, and you're at a serious disadvantage on that. Clonic's going to be better because you know you can kind of turn clonic into a verb,
and it already reminds people of something very unpleasant. like most math theorems.
Yeah. That's what you're called.
Yeah, and so I just think it's a real disadvantage for people with longer names that.
Name. Like not like, you know, Winona Horowitz knew she was never going to make it as a movie star as Winona Horowitz. You know, I mean, you gotta.
Yeah, you
gotta be like early in your career though. It's too late for me.
That's right. Joel, the floor is yours.
So I have kind of a complicated question, and pardon me, I'm going to stumble through this a little bit. I don't talk about this kind of stuff with folks very often, and I'm not a mathematician or a physicist, but it's kind of a math physics question. So I'm kind of interested in field theories that deal with greater than 3+1 dimensions and their derivative projection planes. And one of the reasons is that it may account for perceptible phenomenon in the universe that we don't have direct observation of, is that they may exist in greater than 3+1 dimensions, and we are seeing their projections back across the topology. Does that make any sense at all, the way I'm describing that?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, now here we're into mathematical physics, which is not what I know best, but there are certainly people who think that a lot of phenomena come from, so okay, again, to give some background for people, you know, the basic way we think of the universe nowadays is that it's like a four-dimensional manifold. There's sort of three space dimensions and one time dimension, although those kind of intermingle with each other, and like that's what Joel means by 3+1. Some people would say there's actually a lot more dimensions than that, but they're very short. That's why we don't notice them, except we sort of kind of do notice them, the way that they sort of like entangle with each other and are sort of twisted up and make sort of funny high dimensional shapes that we can't see. That's somehow reflected in properties of the physics that we are able to observe with our kind of great big eyes that can't see very small things. We can only see the dimensions that have sort of some kind of reasonably large extent, which is 4 of them. I don't have an opinion. There's like a lot of like,
I guess, could you describe greater than 3+1 topology a little bit? Because I can't quite get my head wrapped around it.
Well, it's like, you know, higher than 3 dimensions is like 3 dimensions, but more. Is that like, I mean, it's very funny. You know, there's a very funny quote. Sorry for sticking my face in the screen. There's a very funny quote from Jeff Hinton, who is like one of the founders of the theory of neural nets. You know, this kind of like at the moment a kind of very hot topic in AI. You know, and that's an area where you really have to move around in very high dimensional space. So it's not physics, but I mean, it's still very high dimensional space. And somebody asked him like, well, how do you visualize a 14-dimensional space if that happens to be the space you're working in? He's like, well, you visualize 3-dimensional space, but then you say 14. And I think that is very true. And that's in some sense that sort of Joel's question sort of speaks to the point. Can I visualize the kind of like twisted up ultra high dimensional spaces that string theory posits? Like, no, I cannot. When we're at the blackboard drawing pictures of them, we're sort of drawing some kind of attempt to model a 3-dimensional figure on a 2-dimensional chalk surface, because what else can we do where that we are the kind of beings that we are? And, you know, to sort of circle back to Ben's point about what the point of teaching geometry is in the first place, the reason we build those formal structures is that they allow us to go past our intuition and not screw up. They kind of take our intuition, they put an exoskeleton on it to like extend its reach a lot, and they allow us to sort of figure out which things we might be inclined to say about 14-dimensional space are true and which ones are false, because we can't draw a picture of it.
So I mean, I've always thought that the people who are trained in computer science, who, you know, have a sense of dimensions as they're not visualizing dimensions. They're just defining arrays with as many dimensions as they feel like it, right? They have these, you can define whatever dimensionality you want. And I do think that, like, a lot, I think there's a certain amount of reverse engineering from computer science back into the world, where people who are coders who say, okay, let's give this array 23 dimensions, you know, then we'll come back and just sort of like imagine the world that way, but they actually don't have to visualize it.
No, I will. I can tell you from experience, Ben. I work with a lot of those people. I talk to them. They draw the same damn pictures on the chalkboard that I do. They like whiteboards better in computer science. We like chalkboards, but they draw the same pictures.
Really?
They do the same thing. Like, as I said,
That's so
somebody like
funny.
Jeffrey Hinton, he's certainly a computer scientist. Like his way of thinking of stuff is absolutely recognizable to me as a mathematician. It's not that different.
Michael Nelson,
oh yeah,
you get the last question of the evening.
Well, thanks. I grew up in Seattle and was very much a geek, partly because my dad worked for Boeing. I went to science museums. There was lots of stimulation to get me excited about math and science. What projects or initiatives have you seen that are the most effective and the most exciting for getting both kids and adults interested in math? And is there one or two disciplines that needs a lot of help here? Is there one or two that we should really focus on?
Wait, do you mean disciplines of mathematics, or do you
of mathematics? I mean, is number theory more important than statistics, or more boring than calculus?
No, I think they all have their charms. I mean, I'm a number theorist, so of course I'm a fan, and it's a very classical subject with a very long history. So it's in some sense easier to talk about number theory than it is to talk about a lot of other things. But to your question, people spend a lot of time thinking about what's the best way to promote mathematics and mathematical thinking. I think the answer is that people are really different from each other, and people have really different aesthetics, and there's probably no one right way. So I think what we've seen, much more so than when I was a kid, is that there's all kinds of really different people promoting mathematics in really different ways. So I do the thing I do, and I like write books that you can buy in the bookstore, and they have like dopey pictures and jokes and lots of footnotes and whatever. And that's like my thing that I do. Danica McKellar is out there like writing books that look like an issue of Cosmopolitan and are aimed at like 13-year-old girls. And like people like Numberphile and 3 Blue 1 Brown are out there doing like YouTube videos, which is a completely different thing that hits a completely different audience. And so I think we want to broadcast on all the channels because there's no one way that's the best way to teach about mathematics. I mean, I feel like if we had like a juggalo who loved math and they went to the Juggalo Festival and like talked to the juggalos about it. Like
I went to the Juggalo Festival. When the Juggalos had their march on Washington.
Was there a math thing?
There was no math at the Juggalo Fest. The
so
Juggalo March on Washington was my favorite protest I have ever been to.
What is this? What are the Juggalos? Are they exactly what they sound like?
No, they're nothing like what they are.
See, unlike you, I tell people when I don't know about. Please explain Juggalos to me because I don't know what I'm talking about.
So the Juggalos are followers of a band called Insane Clown Posse.
Well, I know that, but I didn't. Do they have a name?
Yeah, it's the Juggalos, and they paint their faces in.
Oh my God.
The FBI at one point a number of years ago suggested in a report
there are criminal gangs of them,
that they were a criminal gang, and the Juggalos took great offense at this and have been militating for delisting ever since. And they showed up at one point. They had a Juggalo march on Washington, and there were 10,000-15,000 of them. And Quinta and I went down to hang out with the Juggalos and check them out. And we were both expecting them to be kind of menacing and upsetting. And they were lovely. I loved the Juggalos.
And look, they ask, wait, we can cuss on your show, right, Kate?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Fuck yeah.
They
I like that he asked me and not you, Ben.
How do they work, right? That's the famous line, fucking magnets. How do they work? And that's a great question, right? Think about how many millions of people were like, wait, fucking magnets, how do they work? Right? This amazing moment of science education that I think we ought to laud. I hope they come back and are like, fucking quadrilaterals, how do they work? Like on their next album, that would be great for me and my people.
I feel
That's
like
your next book, man.
Billie Eilish is like, when we fall asleep, where do we go? Has just like kind of like done something weird and similar for psychiatry. I don't know. I just was like thinking the same thing.
Juggalos and me, math education. by Jordan Ellenberg.
I know.
Adventures in.
I mean, if you need someone to help you like investigate the internet subculture of this, which has got to be profound and deep, I'm there for it.
I am totally pro Juggalo. After attending the March on Washington, I was converted to the cause.
I wonder what Kathleen Belew would say about this, because it says that they're associated with all of these really bad.
They are anti-racist. They're basically like all of the least popular people in your high school all got together and
beat me up.
And followed the same band and painted their faces
instead of beating you up, which they did do.
Yeah.
Instead of that,
right? Instead
it
of
was a more productive.
They channeled their rage toward adoring a terrible band.
So you do have to like the band to be a Juggalo. It's not like its own thing that's moved past the music.
I think so.
Yeah, there is definitely, they are very serious about Insane Clown Posse. To be fair, I have never heard a song by Insane Clown Posse. I heard it's terrible. But I do like the Juggalos. I think they're cool people. So Jordan Ellenberg, one last question before we hurl you into the Midwestern void. Universal time, pro or con?
Christ.
I cannot hear UTC without thinking of it as UFC. So every time somebody mentions it, I think I'm about to watch like large men like kickbox each other, and that's all I have to say about it. That's a stopping point for me. I can't get past that.
What would your so quick secondary two-finger question on this? If you were going to be a UTC wrestler, what would your name be?
Math. Yeah, he would be the self-consciously nerdy one with like big glasses, but who's angry about the way he was treated in high school. Except that Jordan was treated well in high school.
Over your head.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God.
I would jump off the ropes. Do they still jump off the ropes in UFC, or is that not a
You could have you could have pieces of chalk like chiseled into a point, and you could like.
Yeah. All right,
we throw them at people like ninja stars or something. Anyway, getting
Jordan
ahead of
Ellenberg,
myself.
You're a great American.
Is set
Come back soon. We will be back tomorrow with Radley Balco at 2100. UTC. And until then, Kate, that's 22 hours and 55 minutes from now. And until then, Kate,
we don't have fun anymore, but there is an inside and an outside of a wrestling ring. There you go.
What is the hexagon? Pi equals 3.
Yep.
We'll see you tomorrow.